My fellow Americans, the world is confronted by many challenges, and while America has never been able to right every wrong, America has made the world a more secure and prosperous place. And our leadership is necessary to underwrite the global security and prosperity that our children and our grandchildren will depend on. We do so by adhering to a set of core principles. We do whatever is necessary to protect our people. We support our allies when they're in danger. We lead coalitions of countries to uphold international norms. And we strive to stay true to the fundamental values, the desire to live with basic freedom and dignity that is common to human beings wherever they are. That's why people all over the world look to the United States of America to lead. And that's why we do.
President Obama made the call every single military expert knew was a fait accompli to bring America back into the conflict in Iraq. Yes, it is humanitarian aid at this time, but many understand this is just the beginning. Again, are ground troops an inevitability? And if not, how do you save a country that is incapable of saving itself? Let us lay out the strategic facts. Welcome back to MidPoint. Senior Fellow at the London Center for Policy Research, formerly a proud member of the United States Army, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer joins us. Lieutenant Colonel, thanks for being here again.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to be on.
I'm going to start out right now with a statement that the president made. We're going to go back to something he said on December the 14th of 2011. This was at Fort Bragg, and this was the president discussing an end to war.
It's harder to end a war than begin one. Indeed, everything that American troops have done in Iraq, all the fighting, and all the dying, the bleeding, and the building, and the training, and the partnering, all of it has led to this moment of success. Now, Iraq's not a perfect place. It has many challenges ahead. But we're leaving behind a sovereign, stable, and self-reliant Iraq with a representative government that was elected by its people. We're building a new partnership between our nations. And we are ending a war, not with a final battle, but with a final march toward home.
Sovereign, stable, self-reliant. When we hear those words today, it has to make a lot of people either laugh uproariously or simply shake their head in what was an inevitability for this administration.
Clearly, Ed, let's be very clear. What the president just said there was all rhetorical. It was all meant for his reelection. General Austin, who was a commander of forces in Iraq at that point in time, Lloyd Austin, recommended retaining 25 to 30,000 troops on the ground to do essentially stability operations to continue to win the peace. He was overruled. General Austin is now the commander of Central Command who's launching these operations all this time later. So clearly, it's bad when a president decides to make a political decision over a decision that should be based on intelligence and conditions. And that's why we're seeing what we're having here. And then to add to that, one level of addition, President Obama knew in January of this year that ISIS was a real threat. This was indicated to him in his classified briefings. I've had insiders tell me, I was talking to a congressman this morning who talked about some of the briefings they had 6 months ago. And this was not, was predictable, beyond predictable. It was known that this would happen. And now we're left with some really bad, really difficult decisions to have to make. And even what President Obama has done so far is woefully short. He sent in aid, I think, the airdrop yesterday for about 8,000 people. There's 50,000 people stuck on that mountaintop. And all this gear that ISIS is now using in its advance was left by us with the Iraqis. So we've had some real problems here by the fact that we knew this was coming and we did nothing to see it until now it's in a critical mass and we were forced to do something.
You almost make a great point in what you're talking about with the Get Our Stuff Back Act of 2014, which you have talked about. There is no doubt whatsoever that ISIS, ISIL, Islamic State, whatever you want to call them right now, they are using American-manufactured weapons to fight against the Kurds. They're going to use them fighting against Americans if they are there again. How do we get these out of the hands of the terrorists?
Well, two things. First off, the airstrikes which are starting need to be expanded. This is a fairly permissive environment, to use a military term of art. We could send in what we call AC-130s, which loiter very slowly, can take out with great clarity, very little collateral damage, ground targets. They could go on search and destroy missions. And of course, the dreaded, by them, not us, the A-10, our tank buster, which has been very well converted to be essentially a ground attack fighter for all conditions. I would allow those things to go in there and row freely. And Ed, let me be clear on this as well. I would allow General Austin to fight the war. It's time for the president to take a step back, stop the rhetoric, and let his commanders who know how to fight a war, fight a war. We can do this with minimal loss of life, go in and basically take the teeth out of ISIS, and then go the next step, which I believe is to be arming the Kurds, helping the Kurds get their act together, and allowing them, for at least for now, to be our proxy on the ground regarding boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground. I want to get right to that here. Here
Right.
we have airstrikes. Again, I'm not a military official here. I just play one on TV. But everything that I've learned over the years says you must coordinate the two between airstrikes and ground forces. So if indeed we do have airstrikes here, certainly it's going to take out a certain amount of what your enemy has in its hold at this point. But
Right.
isn't it true you can't get the job done unless you have ground forces coordinating with an airstrike?
Oh, absolutely. And if your audience can go to our website, londoncenter.org, we have three things the White House doesn't have: a policy recommendation, a strategy, and a plan to go with it. And what you're talking about is part of the planning. We have to look at this as a two-pronged effort. First off, to just stop the bleeding. Right now, Iraq is bleeding. We've got to do things which are dramatic, which are the airstrikes, and then I would argue working with the Kurds to help them. One of the critical factors, Ed, is the ISIS folks have taken the dam in Mosul. That will that potential will cut off power to all the key cities in the nation, in Iraq, as well as if they break the dam, that would cause huge damage long term, to include flooding and killing people, a lot of people at a very short time. So long term, we've got to look at essentially maybe creating a NATO type organization and include the investments we've made with other Arab nations, the Egyptians, the Jordanians, the Turks, and maybe even the Saudis, to work together as essentially Sunni Muslims facing off against Sunni Muslims, and leaving us out of the equation, but allowing them to kind of sort things through on their own, us supplying them with logistics and some level of intelligence support.
Barack Obama certainly is not the one who started this, but he is the one who is in control right now at this time for American forces. Right. Is it fair to say that he has now, on his shoulders, created a quagmire that will last potentially not just for years, but could be a decades-long disaster in this country and in this region?
Right, and I'll say this very clearly as I can without being, pejorative. I'm not a neocon. I don't believe in the overwhelming use of force indefinitely in every situation. However, this is a situation which calls for military force, and a little bit here and there will prevent you having to go back en masse like we're doing now. I think we could have started this 6 months ago, and we would not be having this discussion right now. We'd be talking about surgical strikes that are meant to basically keep everything in line, perhaps even allowing the country to go into three parts, a partition, if you will. This is going to be part of President Obama's legacy, one way or another. And yes, the quagmire we see now was preventable by the fact that we could have prevented it in 2011 by leaving some residual force, which we had the option to do. Or the second shot President Obama had was to do something when he recognized his original policy was wrong. Both counts are going against him. And at this point in time, we are left with some very difficult and very dire situations, which I do agree we are obligated to get in there and try to help fix.
About a minute or so left here. You have said that what
Sure.
needs to happen right now is to attack the ISIS centers of gravity. What are
Correct.
those, and what would that be?
Well, there's three centers of gravity that we should immediately go after. First off, the leadership. There are elements of the Ba'ath Party which are now supporting the ISIS leadership. That's why they're being so effective. They are actually insiders helping the ISIS folks plan their military attacks. So you've got to go after the leadership. There's ways of doing that. We've done it before against al-Qaeda. We can do it again here. Secondly, they're using equipment that we recognize. Our sensors, our ISR, which are essentially sensors which can detect things, can figure out what's ours, what is ours, because we built it. Go in there and just start whacking the heck out of that stuff, destroying it as quickly as we can. Third, as best we can, work with our allies on the ground to start doing precise strikes and recovering certain nodes relating to, like the dam. That would be something I would recover immediately. And you can do that through, as you point out, coordinating our airstrikes with some on-the-ground troops. Those are the things we must do rapidly now to be effective in our ability to essentially cauterize the wound and start looking for long-term planning to resolve the situation on a long-term basis.
5 seconds, quick answer. An
Sure.
Arab NATO, Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan, do you think they would have the resolve to take on this fight?
At this point, I believe they do, and plus they would be a good counter to the Iranians.
And that would be the final answer at this point. Lieutenant Colonel, always a pleasure, my friend. We'll talk to you again very soon. Have a great weekend.
You too, Ed. Thanks.
All right, later on this hour, Richard Nixon, the man who would have been king and who failed to grasp style over substance. And after the break, can Republicans succeed without overwhelming support from the Hispanic community? There are those who say that without the Latino vote, Republicans cannot succeed. That and much more coming up right here on MidPoint, where we question everything.